This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there.
From Innistrad to Shadowmoor, what spooky top 10 does Nitsuhone have in store?
Hello everyone, I'm Nitsuhone, and it is Wednesday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. As I do every October, this month's Top 10s are all going to be Halloween inspired. Halloween is my favorite holiday. I'm that guy who really likes pumpkin spice and watches a horror movie every day of the month, and my enthusiasm for the holiday always bleeds into my October MTG Top 10s. For this Top 10, we're going to look at the Nightmare creature type. Nightmares and horror movies go hand in hand, so I figured looking at cards with the creature type made sense. To be eligible for this list, a card had to either have the Nightmare creature type or be capable of making Nightmare creatures. While there are only 37 cards that were eligible for this list, Nightmares have been surprisingly successful, with 10 of them having at least 1 point using my system. In this video, we'll be looking at the 10 Nightmares that have found the most success at Magic's highest level of competition. Before we get started, a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. Pro Tour and Mythic Championship top 8s, as well as Legacy and Vintage Championship top 8s are worth 2 points, and a Grand Prix top 8 is worth 1 point. Now, let's look at number 10. At number 10, we have Dream Eater, a relatively recent Nightmare from Guilds of Ravnica. Dream Eater does a whole lot for 6 mana. It has Flash and Flying, surveils 4, and also bounces one of your opponent's non-land permanents to their hand, which is pretty great at instant speed. That's definitely 6 mana of value. An evasive threat that puts your opponent back on board and smooths out your next several draws is amazing. Despite that stuff though, the Dream Eater hasn't really caught on in Standard, not yet anyway. It does have a lone point in the format from a Grand Prix top 8 at Grand Prix Taipei in 2019, where it was played in a Grixis control deck. It is still in Standard now, so I think this Nightmare might end up finding some more relevance before rotation and move up this list. At number 9, I have Slithery Stalker, a creature from Torment who is both a nightmare and a horror, which has to be probably the scariest creature type in all of Magic, right? Anyway, Torment has a whole cycle of nightmare horrors who all do something when they enter the battlefield, and then whatever it is they do, which usually involves exiling something, it gets reversed when that same creature leaves the battlefield. Slithery Stalker has a color hosing ability, essentially Oblivion ringing a white or green creature. That's pretty powerful when it can hit something, since you get to add your Stalker to the board while putting your opponent back on the board. It managed 1 Pro Tour top 8 and block constructed at Pro Tour Osaka in 2002, where it was in the sideboard to be brought in against decks like Blue-Green Madness and Blue-Green Threshold, which had plenty of targets for the Stalker. At number 8 is Plaguemare, which plays up the same play on words that the original Nightmare, Nightmare, made use of, using the word mare, which also of course means female horse. Another color-hosing Nightmare, this one can't be blocked by white creatures, and it has a pretty powerful enter the battlefield ability. A one-sided -1/-1 for your opponent's entire team, which is a great deal when you're paying 3 mana for a 2/2. Plaguemare has actually proven to be good enough to see some play in Legacy. The first points it ever got were actually in a Legacy Death Shadow deck in 2018. It also has a point in Standard, where it was in the sideboard of an Orzhov aggro deck. It seems likely to me that Plaguemare isn't going to be done anytime soon, based on what it's already done. It'll be interesting to see how far it moves up the list in the next few years. At number 7 is Petra Don, another Nightmare from Torment. This one though is a Nightmare Beast. This one exiles lands when it comes into play, which get returned if your opponent ever gets rid of Petra Don. This guy has a huge mana cost at 8, which is why he wasn't usually hard casted. Instead, he was played in reanimation decks, where cheating this guy into play early could be completely backbreaking for your opponent because he went after their mana, and he's also a 5/6. All 3 of Petra Don's points came between 2002 and 2003 in extended decks that were incredibly good at dumping most of their deck into the graveyard at will, and then reanimating something like Petra Don. At number 6 is Lacroix's Champion, yet another Torment Nightmare and another Nightmare Horror. Like the rest of the cycle, he does something when he comes down, in this case taking 6 life from your opponent, but if he ever dies, your opponent gains that life back. The good news is, he can regenerate, meaning it is no easy task to kill this guy. Something that is compounded by this is his high power. It's pretty difficult to ever profitably block Lacroix' champion, and that is a problem, since he does 6 damage as soon as he comes down, and can swing for 6 damage a turn. The champion put up all of its points at the Block Pro Tour Osaka in 2002, where it was played as one of the main win conditions in mono-black control decks. At number 5 we have Doom Whisperer, another nightmare still in Standard. The Whisperer brings impressive evasive stats as a 5-mana 6/6 with flying and trample, and it has a way to surveil that doesn't cost any mana at all. That's pretty powerful since you can potentially mill a ton of cards with it right away, or just use it to help smooth out your draws while you bash your opponent's face in with a 6/6. The Whisperer saw all of its play in the Standard of 2018, where it was featured in some versions of Golgari midrange. The efficiency and value this gives you makes it pretty likely that it finds more success before rotating out of Standard. At number 4 we have World Gorger Dragon, who isn't from Torment but is in the same block as Torment. But this one didn't catch on right away, the same way the others we have looked at did. While you get a big dragon, you also get a crazy effect that just gets rid of everything, but eventually, in Vintage, people found a way to abuse this seemingly bad ability. People figured out that combined with Animate Dead, you could reanimate the dragon, which would have its trigger go on the stack, which removes the Animate Dead, but then the dragon dies so it comes back again and you get the Animate Dead back. This might sound useless, but if you have any mana in play, every time all the permanents return, you get to add mana to your mana pool. They keep coming back into play untapped every time the World Gorger Dragon trigger happens. Eventually, you generate infinite mana and kill your opponent with it in a multitude of different ways. The combo was pretty great in Vintage, where it found a lot of success in the mid-2000s. When Legacy was separated from Vintage in 2004, they banned World Gorger Dragon there so that the combo wouldn't be a problem, showing you just how powerful it is if they didn't want it in one of Magic's most powerful formats. And at number 3 is Faceless Butcher. Yeah, another nightmare from Torment. Turns out that the majority of the good ones are from Torment, or at least Odyssey block. Anyway, Faceless Butcher can exile any creature when it comes into play, and return that creature when it leaves. A 2/3 for 4 mana with that effect is pretty efficient, and as a result it saw a lot of play. It was played in a wide variety of black decks. In block, this included blue-black aggro and mono-black control. It didn't find any success in Standard, but it did in Extended, in decks like mono-black Reanimator and The Rock. Even though it got reprinted as a time-shifted card in Time Spiral block, which means it had another shot at Standard and is also legal in Modern right now, the Butcher hasn't seen play since 2003. These days, we can get similar effects for a lot less mana. At number 2, we have our last Torment Nightmare to make the list, Miz Marek Fiend. This one lets you take a card of your choice from your opponent's hand when it comes down, which it of course returns after it dies. This type of effect is powerful. Even if your opponent does find a way to get rid of the Fiend a turn or two later, you have disrupted their plans one way or another, since you get to take whatever card would be ideal for them to play on their next turn, and now at the very least they have to wait to play it. It's a lot like Kite Sail Freebooter that a lot of people have played in Standard recently and are seeing play in Modern now. It was in 4 of the top 8 decks at the Block Pro Tour in 2002, appearing in both blue-black aggro and mono-black control decks. It saw very little play in Standard, but has seen play in most other formats where it has been legal. In Extended, it was played in Reanimator and Suicide Black, and in Legacy it saw play in Rock decks. Even though it has an impressive multi-format resume, it hasn't put up any points since 2009, and it doesn't seem super likely that it's going to anytime soon. And at number 1, we have Ashleigh, Nightmare Weaver. Ashleigh has Nightmare in the name and in the text box, and apparently one of Ashleigh's abilities as a Planeswalker involves creating nightmares. Ashleigh is a powerful Planeswalker at only 3 mana who can mill the opponent's deck and then steal creatures that are milled and warp them into nightmares. Ashleigh saw a lot of play in Standard control decks, including Esper, Sultai, Blue-Black Control, and Esper Dragons. Recently, Ashleigh has a top 8 from a Modern Lantern control deck, which is a deck that tries to have absolute control over what your opponent does and doesn't draw, and obviously Ashleigh can help you with that. It seems probable in the future that Ashleigh will put up a few more points in Modern. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. I'll be back on Friday with another Halloween-inspired list. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you see future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to see all the ones I've done in the past, including a bunch of Halloween-themed ones from the years past, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.